Welcome to Mountain Musings. If we haven't met, my name is Dr. Michael Smith, and I've been practicing integrative medicine for 30 years. I practice a combination of traditional Chinese medicine and functional medicine, and a couple of somewhat unique approaches to resolving trauma and addiction. For the next couple of months, I'm going to be sharing a series of topics on what we now call the terrain model of healing. So for each week, I'll be offering a presentation that discusses each terrain, which I'll speak to in a moment. And then after that discussion, I'll be sharing another presentation or a video on some practical things you can do. It might be exercise, it might be breath work, it might be other aspects of internal awareness practice. And the third thing I'll be sharing is kind of more the clinician's notes on the do's and don'ts with respect to diet and supplements and other things that are a little bit more directed at experimenting, you could say, on your health through each of these terrains. The term terrain model, or people are using terms like cellular terrains or things like that, is in a way fairly new, but in a way it's also as old as medicine, because that's in fact the way Chinese medicine has learned to observe and understand our health, and why Chinese medicine focuses so much on organ systems, meridian systems, and other ways of seeing how the body collaborates in a specific way. When we think of terrains, we often think more of this in the sense of landscape or topography, or something that has an available and clear structure or ecology that we can change or take care of in a way that's very specific to that terrain. Unlike Western medicine, which I'm a big fan of, so I'm not spanking anyone, Western medicine has kind of fallen prey to society's desire for short-term needs, for the industrial keeping busy kind of model of life. So unfortunately, Western medicine is now focusing on what's your diagnosis, what's the standard of care, and this is your prescription and or surgery and or referral to a specialist to continue down that road. And we're very, very lucky to have that kind of referee in our busy, somewhat experimental modern lives. If you're unsatisfied with that option and want to go a little bit deeper into your health, that's why I'm choosing to share what I want to share for the next few weeks or months on this terrain model, because it isn't about a diagnosis, it isn't about treating a disease, it's about all of us taking a moment and recognizing that, say for today we're going to talk about circulation, and I'll give you the list of terrains in a moment, that when we focus on a physiological function or say a membrane system or something like that, we're all aware that we're working with what already exists. We're working with the direct, tangible experience you have of that terrain or that system, and any changes that are going to happen when you're taking care of that system a little bit more conscientiously, if you will. So these are the 9 terrains that I am going to be focusing on. First is going to be your overall circulatory health, the degradation of your vascular tissue, and what's called angiogenesis, or the times at which your body suddenly decides it has to start sprouting a lot of new blood vessels, which is usually not a good thing. The second one is called metabolic adaptability. We'll get into that when we do. The third one is your digestive system and what's called your microbiome, which I think is now something we're all aware of, that your body is full of a whole bunch of other species of life besides yourself, and that we're all reliant on those balances of species to stay well. The fourth is chronic low-grade infections, which is something I'm very proactive about with my patients and with myself. Most of us, as we progress through life, as we get older, those infections are what wear us down over time, and unfortunately, as triggering as this might be, most of us, if we live to the end of our natural lives, usually die of an infection that fills our lungs with fluid, and that's our last day. So the longer we can keep these infections at bay, the better. The fifth one is immune system dysregulation and chronic inflammation. Too much to say about that one, but I'm sure there's all kinds of imagery happening for all of us. The sixth one is called environmental load and mitochondrial capacity. And that one can get pretty complicated because it really has to do with a lot of tricky chemistry and a lot of really, really nuanced things that are happening inside the inside of the engines of the inside of all of your cells. which you could say is, in one sense, the primary and overall determining factor of every aspect of your physiology. The seventh is called gene expression and epigenetics, which might sound really complicated, but it really just has to do with how all of the, you could call, machinery or engines within your body work together to take in what they need and get rid of what they don't, and not cause each other a whole pile of problems while they keep us growing and healing and becoming the best metabolism and experience of being alive possible. The eighth is called stress, rest, sleep, and connection, which I think is common sense and the foundation of pretty much all life, no matter if you're a butterfly, a bat, or a badass human being. And number 9 is an extension of that, mental, emotional, and spiritual disorientation, which in simplest terms asks us all to notice that we either have an orientation like a compass dial that we're conscious of, that we're really clear on, and that we're moving in and through our lives very, very consciously, or we might be disoriented in a way that contributes to a lot of stress and a lot of difficulty, because the way we're going, which is often the result of conditioning and trauma and other factors, gives us the sense that we have to go about our lives heading in a direction because of our belief it's the right way or the only way, that is stopping us from finding a better way or one that's more true to our authentic self. So today we're going to be talking about circulatory degradation and angiogenesis. So there's a few different kinds of circulation, and I'll be talking about each of them individually. And with each one I want to speak to what it is that actually causes it the most harm, and a lot of these are pretty much common sense. And then to give us, all of us a sense of the best things we can do for each aspect of our circulation. So here are the primary types of circulation that we're going to talk about. First is your vascular or cardiovascular or blood circulation. The next is your lymphatic circulation, followed by your cerebrospinal circulation. Then an aspect of circulation that moves through what is called your interstitium and moves something that we call ground substance around, which I don't think most people really talk about that much. So if I just sounded like someone speaking an alien language, don't feel strange or left out. This is a really big deep dive into the deepest aspects of health and circulation that Chinese medicine, Qigong, and other practices are really centered on. And we'll get into that. It's pretty fascinating. And then we're going to be speaking about microcirculation, which is kind of what circulation looks like at the end of things, say, going from your heart to the end of your arteries, and then circulation going back to your heart through your internal organs. But microcirculation is all of the stuff that happens kind of at the end of the plus side of circulation, at the beginning of the minus or drawing back side of circulation, where you could say most of the stagnation actually happens in our bodies and in our lives. If you're wondering, well, Michael, what about qi circulation? Qi, as we're going to discover as we talk about all of these things, is an implicit aspect of every aspect of circulation with respect to the things we can see. It's a component of all of those things, again, we can see, but it often works in the ways that we can't see. So we'll get into that as well. So let's dive into your cardiovascular circulation or your vascular system. Now there's a meme or a urban myth fact, or whatever the word is for this, that says that most adults have about 100,000 kilometers of vascular tissue in their bodies, and that's maybe a little bit true. When you really dive into it, it's more like about 8 to 10,000 kilometers of actual tubing, you could say, and the rest of that circulation, or those extra 80,000 kilometers, is actually just in the capillary beds of the body. So depending on how you want to look at it, there's just a really, really almost unbelievably massive, if it's 8 to 10,000 or up to 100,000 kilometers. What we really want to think about is not how big that is, but how many, let's just say, inches of tubing or piping or life or death circulation or plumbing that all of us have, and that every one of those inches, as it degrades in its functionality for many reasons, the entire system now has to work harder. So again, if we just start with, say, 10,000 kilometers of vascular tissue, every inch matters. And I know I'm mixing metric and imperial just because it's fun. So I'll be showing some images as I go through this part, just because I'm going to be reading something off of a piece of paper. So here are the worst possible things that any of us in modern life could do for that 8 to 10 or 100,000 kilometers of view. First one, of course, is smoking. And when I say smoking, I don't mean having some ceremonial tobacco or something once in a while, or on weekends having a little cannabis with friends or something like that. When I'm thinking of smoking, I'm thinking of commercial tobacco, 10, 20 plus cigarettes a day. The effect of smoking directly damages the actual blood vessel linings. It promotes what's called arteriosclerosis, or scarring, and little wound-like patches that become hardened cholesterol and immune scars that actually build up and become things that narrow our vascular highways, if you will, messing up our traffic and flow, and that includes blood flow and Qi flow. Smoking also increases the risk of clot formation and raises your blood pressure. Smoking is arguably the single most modifiable risk factor in health, but especially in cardiovascular health and disease. A sedentary lifestyle combined with a modern diet is the second worst thing any of us could do for our vascular system. If you're living on processed foods, high trans fats, high sugars, high refined carbohydrates and starches, as well as having a very inactive lifestyle, the traffic jam is actually one of calories, calorie storage, chronic inflammation, and all of the other side effects that happen with our modern lifestyle. This creates the perfect storm for hypertension, again, arteriosclerosis, pre-diabetes, full-blown diabetes, what we call type 3 diabetes, or brain diabetes, or Alzheimer's disease, as well as the actual functional heart disease. Chronic, untreated, or unmanaged stress is the third and worst thing you can do for your cardiovascular system. Sustained elevation of cortisol, catecholamines, other stress hormones, all damage your blood vessels. They promote chronic inflammation, and they increase the probability or risks of cardiovascular events, or of heart attacks, myocardial infarctions, TIAs, or mini strokes and things like that. When we look at lymphatic circulation, the worst things we can do, again, are insufficient physical activity. Your lymphatic system doesn't have a pump like your heart, so the pump is actually through your abdominal movements. So a lot of jumping up and down, a lot of twisting, a lot of play, a little bit of rough play, any kind of complex movement that keeps you going, deep, whole body organized breath work is actually functionally and physically necessary for you to be healthy and for your lymphatic system to have actual circulation. So prolonged immobility, which can happen for many reasons, causes your lymphatic system and fluids to become stagnant. This impairs your immune function in about 5 different ways, and it tends to make your body fill up with mildly septic or fluids that are mildly infected, which again makes your immune system very busy, but your immune system very sluggish, which is a really bad combination. Another big factor in lymphatic health and limitations for lymphatic health are chronic dehydration. So imagine your lymphatic system might be functioning great even if it is moving because you're getting enough movement, but if the lymphatic fluid doesn't have enough what's called free water flowing through your system, then it can't actually mobilize the waste materials. As the waste materials break down without enough hydration, enough water, the concentration of the breakdown materials again becomes septic and or just directly toxic. So I always offer people this: imagine you have a cup of this horrible stuff we used to, well, that's my opinion, the stuff we used to drink called Tang, which was very tangy. It was meant to be some kind of fake orange juice, and if you didn't like the flavor, you would have to put more water in there to make it drinkable. Sorry to the people who sell that stuff, it's just an example. So your lymphatic system can become too tart or too intense because there's just too much concentration. So we want enough hydration daily, especially first thing in the morning, to make sure your body has enough, not only water, but what's called free water, so that your lymphatic system can actually function as a kind of fluid highway. One of the bigger dangers to your lymphatic system, assuming that perhaps your lifestyle isn't giving you enough movement, perhaps you're not getting enough water, and if your body is chronically activated on the level of your immune system, allergies, autoimmune dysfunction, or chronic inflammation for other reasons, tends to make your lymphatic nodules more inflamed, more congested, and sometimes more calcified. And that's just something that happens in chronic inflammation. It can happen to your blood vessels, your lymphatic nodules, it can happen to your brain, it can happen to your muscles, it can happen everywhere. So chronic inflammation, bad for everybody, but it actually damages structurally your lymph nodes. Third thing to be aware of in circulation is, again, your cerebral spinal fluid, which moves up and down through your spinal column, actually washes across your brain through what's called lymphatic cleansing, and washes back down and allows your body to actually physically remove hostile inflammatory metabolites, degraded protein structures. There's a lot of chemical machinery going on in the structure of your brain, as you can imagine. And if we're not clearing off the debris or the incomplete metabolites in that way, your neurons, your physical brain tissue is more prone to plaquing, to calcification as well, and or the damage, especially if you have a high insulin, high sugar kind of diet, because your brain doesn't want to be diabetes either. One of the worst things that can actually happen for your cerebral spinal fluid, besides again a sedentary lifestyle, would be any kind of post-concussive injuries. Once your physical brain has been bonked enough to want to swell up enough to protect itself from the next hit, that sets off the same process that we think of with chronic inflammation. It just includes more swelling, slower lymphatic cleansing, and also certain behavioral changes that are really quite uncomfortable. Another profound wound for your cerebral spinal fluid circulation and our brain, which hopefully all of us are holding dear as something that's important, is chronic insomnia or poor sleep cycle depth. I'm not going to go into this in detail right now, but your sleep isn't an on-off process. It's a migrating sequence of stages that have to happen several times throughout your entire sleep cycle. If you're not getting enough miniature complete cycles within the entire cycle of your sleep, the actual cleansing process of your brain gets sluggish again, and eventually, without enough proper sleep, no matter what's going on in your life, it's going to cause brain damage. It's going to cause all kinds of other problems because you're running on fumes, and your adrenal hormones are basically pedal to the metal. On one level to keep you going, and on the other level you have a foot on the brakes just trying to help you find some kind of opportunity to rest. And that's modern burnout, which highly don't recommend that. As obvious as this might sound, another profound wound to the structure of your brain and your cerebral spinal fluid exchange is the use of alcohol and other we call hard drugs that directly impact the physiology and obviously the experience we have of our brain. Because of how excitatory or how sedating drugs tend to be depending on the kind of outcome that we're seeking with drug use, and this is a judgment-free zone, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone, but if you try and put the brakes on your brain and sedate it too much, and cannabis can do this in some pretty profound ways, obviously the use of pharmaceutical sedatives and other drugs that are out there damage the actual awareness systems of your brain, because now your brain is fighting against blankets upon blankets upon blankets of sedation and restraint, or again, the kind of the brake pedal. So of course your body's response is turn up the gas pedal to the metal, induce as much stress as we can to at least perhaps imagine getting pulled over on the road and here comes the police to knock on your window, and your primary focus right now is to seem as alert as you can because you're half asleep or something like that. The opposite is also true if you're a person who's prone to using drugs, even in excess of caffeine, that are overly stimulating. That, of course, messes with your body's baseline of kind of get up and go and how to rest deeply. That overstimulation can affect every part of your nervous system. In the context of substance abuse and the biochemical disorientation that's going on, your body is either, gas pedal or brake pedal or both. And that profound stress to your physiology reduces your ability to actually produce cerebral spinal fluid. This can directly affect your vision, your peripheral nerve sensations, the chemicals that do and don't get through your blood-brain barrier, which might be too many things or not enough things, all of which profoundly impair, again, the cerebral spinal fluids, lymphatic cleansing of the brain. So, as the saying almost always goes, the fourth circulatory system that we want to look into has to do with what's called interstitial circulation. Now, when you read the ancient classic texts of Chinese medicine, which I'm sure very few people actually want to bother doing, you can see that they're actually really trying to describe things that they know are there that they can't see because 2,000 years ago they didn't have any microscopes to actually see the deeper sponge-like filament-like networks that exist between your internal organs, especially between the chest spaces and also the spaces between muscles and other large tissues in your body. So imagine just for a moment that you have a whole bunch of really thin layers of little foam like packaging material, actual sponges that sit in places, and that within those connective tissue spaces, not only do they anchor your body's tissues to each other, allow your organs to kind of all hang out without basically puddling and crushing each other inside of your body, there's also those sponge-like membranes and filaments are also a medium through which a certain kind of tissue moves. Now that tissue is actually called ground substance. Check it out. It's a fascinating thing to look into, and it really confirms what Chinese medicine has been talking about in the context of energy movement or qi movement, as well as blood movement, as well as the movement of what we call Jing, which are different kinds of fluids. So within the Chinese medicine model, we have really thin fluids we call Jin, and really thicker fluids we call Ye. And the Jin fluids are what we would call in medicine or modern science free water. And that means it's fluid that is not just water in the sense that it's in a cup. It's water that has a small amount of very specific kind of proteins that actually make the water a tiny bit thicker, but not so thick that it would become a jello or a gel. Now, you could think of this as we all start buying bone broth nowadays. Imagine you bought some bone broth and you took it home, and this is the test for bone broth, by the way. You put it in the fridge, and when you try and pour it, if it isn't solid, that's what you might call really weak bone broth, or that's what we call free water. And in that way, the free water moves through your body very easily, and it can absorb a bit of impact. It can transfer information and nutrients and other things fairly rapidly, and it's very easily replaced. So that's also kind of like lymphatic circulation in a way, because it's based on movement. And how you actually mobilize your body when you're breathing. The other part of this ground substance is called bound water. And again, going back to the bone broth, if you're lucky, make your own. If you get some bone broth, wherever you might get it, you put it in the fridge and you go to pour it, and it's big and lumpy and it's more like jello, then that's the kind of bone broth or the kind of gelatinous, jello-like broth you want. And your body actually is made of a considerable amount, almost, I think, 45% of your physical body weight is free water, about 15% of your body weight is that bound water. And That is a huge part of your body's actual communication system, nutrition system, and shock absorbing system. And this is a bit trippy to think about, but when you really get into the physics of what's going on in there, there's a lot of information and a lot of actual charge, energy, electron transports and things like that, mechanisms within the bound water of your body. So when it comes to that system, the don'ts would be modern life. Pregnant pause. Because human beings have evolved, most of our evolutionary past, at least as human beings, is still very migratory. You know, walking, climbing, moving, carrying, hunting, trapping, tracking, farming, playing. Did I mention playing? Oh, the playing. That's always good. So the more our lives have been, you know, sit and watch, sit and think, sit and wait, sit and complain, or whatever else we might be doing, the less that actual system can possibly work. And this is measurably, and I'm speaking as a scientist for a moment, measurably one of the most profound things about properly practiced Qigong. And that means practices that work directly with your actual membranes on purpose throughout all possible directions, torsions, twisting, undulations, gyrations, deep breathing, reaching to the end carefully without strain to all of your ranges of motion, so that that circulatory system works. So the only way, I guess, for me to describe the don'ts of your interstitial circulation is to talk about the do's, because that's actually just a fundamental need for human health. If you're not moving a couple of times a day for 20 minutes, like you're making up your own Tai Chi or Qigong, or please go and learn some, Qigong or Tai Chi or something like that, your body cannot move these fluids any other way. And they make up more than half of your physical physiology in the sense of mass. So those are your friends, and as the funny cartoon character says, you got to move it, or else it doesn't move. My poor attempts at humor. So the fifth kind of circulation is that microcirculation. And again, that's at the end of the pumping part of your circulation. It's in the extracellular space where that free water and bound water are doing a part of their job, but that also includes the movement of your blood and lymph, not just the movement of the ground substance. The worst possible things that you can do for your microcirculation go back to again, smoking or being pre-diabetic or full-blown diabetic, because of how it actually atrophies or dries up or damages the finest little blood vessels at the end of the proverbial road of your circulatory system. They're the most fragile. They have the most interaction with the best and the worst aspects of what's inside your blood as a tissue. This not only damages your microvascular structure, it also damages the ends of your nerves. It can cause neuropathy or numbness, and it is quite noticeable when you first see that if you have a wound of some kind and it seems to take a really long time to heal, that's a really big warning for your immune system, your circulation, your nutritional status, and a whole bunch of other things. So it's always a good idea to if you bang into something, if you cut yourself by accident, to watch the rate at which that wound heals. It's kind of like a dashboard light for your adaptive physiology, but especially your microcirculation. As with other systems in your body, chronic inflammation, poor diet, all of that, in the sense of a traffic jam, is going to get worse and worse and worse at the smallest little single lanes, and then little trails, and then little bike trails, and then tight ropes that exist at the end of all of your circulatory systems. And as I mentioned throughout this whole conversation so far, activity, movement, even when I was speaking about Qigong and that ground substance, is an essential component of microcirculation. There are certain kinds of massage, body work, that can also help, but you want to be working with someone who's aware, if you have any kind of diagnosis or circulatory problem, that there's a risk at pushing too much from the outside in at trying to make your internal organs, make your bigger circulatory system suddenly responsible for the massive amount of circulation that happens in your microvasculature. So if I go back to the urban myth that we have 100,000 kilometers of vascular tissue, if we're willing to do the math and say about 10,000 kilometers of that, no one knows for sure, is actually in your visible vasculature, and the rest of it, 90,000 or 90% of that, is in your microvasculature. Notice where the real traffic jams and the real chronic infections and the real day-to-day tear down, breakdown, damage, stiffening, and atrophy actually happens, where the chronic infections are going to get the worst. And what you're actually asking the 10% of you that actually can recycle regular circulatory fluids to deal with, if someone decides to give you a massive lymphatic draining massage or a big, rolling, kind of foam rolling workout, or other forms of body work that really focus on moving those fluids. And this is why most body workers who are competent are always going to ask you, please drink a bunch of water before, drink a bunch of water after this treatment, and tell you, that you might get a couple of days of what feel like flu symptoms after some really strong body work. And if that's true, again, little dashboard light warning, you're probably going to want to do something about your circulation in its entirety. So let's talk about the do's, the things that are going to help you with these 5 different kinds of circulation. And as I think from what I've said so far, what those are likely to be are pretty obvious. So with your cardiovascular circulation, the most important thing is absolutely any kind of exercise that actually takes you past the boundary of just regular movement. Now that can be relatively aerobic, it can be what's called high intensity interval training, it can be more specific to regular and intense resistance training. All of those affect your vascular circulation and the actual inner lining and inner musculature of those thousands of kilometers of you in ways that I could do an entire podcast about, and maybe I will. But that's a need. Vitamin exercise, vitamin movement, vitamin resistance training, whatever you want to call it. Keeping your inflammatory status down. So that's stress, that's avoiding all of the risk factors, and it's also avoiding all of the foods that are prone to causing inflammatory triggers. And for some people that might be gluten, it might be dairy, it might be sugar, it might be alcohol. For other people it might be leftovers that are high in histamines. So this is where you want to start individualizing things a bit too. When we say that stress is bad, that's in a way obvious. Maybe stress can be fun sometimes too. But when we say, we want to have some way of dealing with stress management. So let's all say that we are living on a pendulum. And that pendulum I'm going to call your adaptive capacity. And that pendulum swings between your volume of distress, and that could be, people, money, time, pressure, aliens, or whatever. Don't watch the news. But that volume of distress can be made of anything, right? And then on the opposite side of that pendulum of your adaptive capacity is what you do to improve your adaptive resources. Now, obviously sleep and connection and real food and maybe some supplements and other things are a good idea. But the thing that I'm asking all of us to just take a moment and kind of own, if I can say it that way, is however much of your life you have spent over here in volume of distress is now something that you could say the universe has given you as a sacred journey to go on, to learn and embody and experience and explore, which is developing your adaptive resources. Now, if you're not learning and exploring and experimenting and investing a good amount of time, if not half of your life, including not just your sleep, that pendulum, that balance of your adaptive capacity, your volume of distress, and your adaptive resources is out of balance. And if there's nothing else you take away from this conversation about how to improve your health in the sense of the terrain of circulation, it's this balance. There's no other easier way to put it. So from a cardiovascular point of view, I think we're all pretty clear on the things you don't want to put into your body because they're going to hurt you. But what if you decided for 3 months to make your depth of sleep your new adventure at becoming really good at life? Or again, with this idea of from volume of distress to building adaptive resources, how deeply can you relax and not just pass out because you're tired? How deeply can you release tension from your body, as if it's just as important as adding tension to your body to build strength and tone and to burn off some fat? And that's I think the reason why when we look at Eastern medicine, it seems to always be about what's this thing about stillness and meditation and calming down and stretching and yawning and breathing? Like, where's the fun in that? Well, that's the thing that allows you to have all this fun over here. So really important to keep that balance. So I'm going to finish this up as quickly as I can. So with your lymphatic circulation, as I said, you got to move, and you have to make sure that besides, if it's jumping up and down, people do a lot of rebounding on those little mini trampolines, a lot of dynamic movement. I think of I forgot the name of it, contact improv or other kinds of dance where you're actually moving with other people and playing with other people's body weight. Laughter is good medicine. We don't call it a belly laugh by accident. So, I can't remember the name of someone famous many years ago. They were diagnosed with cancer. They put themselves in a hotel room for some reason and watched comedy for, I think, a couple of months or something like that, and just laughed and laughed and laughed, and they turned out that resolved their cancer. So I'm not prescribing that as an actual, statistical treatment for a diagnosable condition, but it's a great story about, laughter good, movement good, deep breath work, really huge diaphragmatic perennial floor kind of mobilizing breath work. And again, if you have a sedentary life, you have to balance that with enough mobility to balance that sedentary life. A big part of your lymphatic tissue is that ground substance, a bit of brown water, mostly free water. So bone broth, the good stuff, electrolyte fluids that allow your body to absorb all aspects of that usable water. I haven't done a lot of research on what I believe is called hydrogen water, so I'm not an expert at that at all. I don't even remember the name, so laugh away I am. But there might be something in that as well, because your lymphatic system doesn't just need water full of whatever's in city water. Your body really needs water that seems like it's coming out of a creek, so that it's full of minerals and other things that actually signal your body to absorb that water. So again, by having electrolytes, small amounts of dissolved proteins like the gelatins and bone broths are amazingly good for your lymphatic system. Another thing that people do for your lymphatic system could be lymphatic drainage massage or dry brushing. Those are kind of self-massage routines that you can do. You can learn about that on the internet. And are going to see someone. I would encourage you to start small and work your way up to like full limb and then full body experiences or procedures. And again, keep in mind, if you're getting flu symptoms, it's because your immune system is having a hard time keeping up with cleaning up the mess that's now stuck in the kind of back alleys of the New York of your circulatory system, because your lymphatic system is in a way the back alleys of your body. When we look at cerebral spinal fluid and the good things that you can do, there are so many different kinds of mobility that you can do within your spine, within the torsion of your spine, within the breath work, and other aspects of, again, Qigong yoga, comprehensive breath work that have been around for thousands of years because they benefit health for, pick your reason of what we said so far. But if we were only to focus on your cerebral spinal fluid, and I'm just realizing that I have this scroll behind me, which I'm not going to try to explain right now, but it is really about how your spine and the circulatory systems in your body on a more energy systems level work, but they all anchor themselves in making sure that what's moving up and down in the spine on many levels, including your cerebral spinal fluid, is as clear as possible in its moving up, and as clear, although somewhat turbid, in the sense of you are cleaning something up, coming down. So I'll leave that there, but just to say that, again, for many, many, many generations, centuries, maybe even millennia, keeping your cerebral spinal fluid moving cleanly is a really important thing. And again, good sleep, good movement, good exercise, deep breathing, good hydration, again with respect to electrolytes or broths and things like that, so that the free water component of what's moving up and down your spine is an articulate, active fluid. And that's why I keep talking about this. Water isn't beneficial until it turns into either free water, bone broth light, full of goodness, or bound water, which is like gelatinous bone broth, which makes up, again, a huge part of your body and your cerebral spinal fluid. If you've had any previous history of head injuries, I've been a martial artist for almost 50 years, oh my god, and yeah, I've been punched and kicked in the head a bunch of times. Maybe that explains a lot. But if you have had any of those kind of things in your past, just take extra care. If you've ever been diagnosed as actually having a concussion, now you have post-concussive syndrome, and that in itself is kind of like taking care of a wounded animal in your life, in the sense that you can't just take it for granted that your brain and your circulatory system and your lymphatic system are just normal. If you have some kind of wound, you need to go through the process of healing that wound. So when we look at that fourth kind of circulation, again, that interstitial circulation, I've kind of described all of the basics in general, but there's two words that I'm going to encourage you to really become familiar with. One is called pandiculation, and pandiculation is what we all do when we go, and we kind of do this weird thing where we sort of stiffen our limbs and then push through the stiffness of our limbs to the extension of our range of motion. We take deep breaths, we often yawn. Now that's an actual survival mechanism for times when any animal, humans, cats, dogs, and everybody else, isn't getting enough movement. And if you've ever had a cat, they do this 40 to 60 times a day if they're stuck inside, because otherwise their body is going to turn into a lump of Velcro in the sense of stiff and inflamed and sore and in pain. Humans, have our sedentary hibernating times, in winter throughout our evolutionary past. So we've learned to do all these things that we do. We can call them yoga and qigong and intuitive movement and ecstatic dance, and make up your own. Why not? Somebody made up this other stuff a long time ago. But as long as what you're doing includes, and you might want to study the whole complex of pandiculation, then you actually are fairly certain that the interstitial fluids of your body are getting the kind of movement that they need to actually mobilize that ground substance back and forth. Now, the next word that I'm going to say is taking that to another level, and that word is tensegrity, or myofascial whole body tensegrity, which means every filament, every fiber, every fingernail to toenail, top of your head to the bottom of your heels, every tissue in your body has not only yawned and gotten a sense of its range of motion, but it's also done so in the context of resistance or weight or changing momentum. So this is where things like Tai Chi, more advanced kinds of Qigong, we call it muscle tendon change, or I Ching, other practices are so valued in the world for people who know what they're about, because they're really the only systems in the world that have complete whole body myofascial tensegrity as a part of what their outcome is. Now you could say any form of athleticism, any kind of dynamic movement has that in a way, but it isn't something that you could say is perfectly balanced and optimized for every aspect of movement. So please look up pandiculation tensegrity, where they're the most efficiently developed, and then maybe consider adding that to one thing to do for a year of your life to make sure that your entire ground substance circulation and the ability to regenerate every system in your body that I've talked about, as well as deeper tissues like brains and bones and organs and things like that, have their best chance to get what they need. And finally, the best things you can do for microcirculation, besides don't do all the don'ts and do all the do's that I just talked about, also includes aspects of breath work and exercise and or nutrients and or foods that increase nitric oxide. Now I'm going to talk about this in a lot more in the second video in this series, because there's a couple of really, really easy to learn and smart breathwork practices that you can do to increase the most important third breath gas you have. We all know about carbon dioxide, we all know about oxygen, but not a lot of us are talking about maintaining and optimizing and increasing throughout your day, and depending on your clinical situation, your body's profound need for nitric oxide to get the entire traffic system of circulation to just work in the way it's meant to. We've all heard of the we've all heard of the very new and also very old habit of jumping into a cold plunge or having a cold shower. Depending on where you're at in your life, where you're at with your metabolism, many other factors, you might want to talk to a clinician about whether or not that's the best thing for you. If you want to give it a little bit of a try, the first thing I often recommend my patients try is called contrast showers, where you do the things you're usually going to do in your shower, and then you just spend a couple of minutes turning it up as hot as feels like it's going to be okay for 10, 20, 30 seconds, and then as cold as feels like you can tolerate that for 10, 20, 30 seconds. And then you just go back and forth for a couple of minutes and then just see what happens. And again, flu symptoms might come up, something else might come up, headaches might come up. And whatever that thing that comes up, please talk to your clinician about that. Unless you're just feeling amazing, and then tell them about that too. Because that might also help you work with your clinician around, oh yeah, more than 80-90% of your actual circulatory system exists in the swampy tissue microcirculation that doesn't really have a direct pathway or a direct pump in the way that the rest of your vascular system does. A few other things you can do for microcirculation that come to mind are high polyphenol foods, which I'll be talking about for the next few months, because polyphenols are in a way the active constituents of almost all plant medicines in different ways. Nutrient-dense anti-inflammatory supplements and foods like fish oils, omega-3 fatty acids, and that whole complex are also really a good idea. Similar kinds of exercise, the stuff that burns off adrenaline, the stuff that produces nitric oxide, the stuff that produces growth hormones, also really good for microcirculation as well. Intermittent fasting is also a great benefit because it helps clean up not only the stuff that gets stuck in the extracellular space, it also cleans up what's going on the intracellular space, or what's going on inside your cells. So again, when we playfully think of your microcirculation as kind of the back alleys of the body, imagine a month. I'm not suggesting you fast for a month, but a period of time where no new garbage is added to the back alleys, and the people who are responsible for cleaning them up are in there, maybe even scrubbing them a little bit. So that's what fasting or intermittent fasting can do on a circulatory and a cellular level. And keep in mind that periods of extended food scarcity are part of human evolution. So our bodies have adapted to that as, let's use that for a force of good instead of just a thing to worry about. And one other thing that may seem obvious, but is becoming another thing that's just sort of ground swelling up in the kind of modern take care of yourself aspects of the online infosphere, is get up in the morning, go outside, look at the horizon, not directly at the sun, but in the direction of the sun, scan the horizon back and forth, stand there if you can, move around a little bit if you choose to, for about 20 minutes and get as much sun exposure as you can. Now, depending on where you live, that might involve cracking a window open, staying inside where maybe it's a patio window or a big bay window or something. So again, you're getting as much sun exposure you can, but it's in the first 30, 40 minutes of the day that has the most direct impact on everything that drives deeper metabolic health. So if you're wondering, there's one part of this conversation that I haven't brought up yet, and that's called angiogenesis. Angiogenesis basically means the formation of new blood vessels. Now, if you're doing a lot of exercise and you're building a lot of muscles, your body's going to have to build a certain amount of blood vessels to build those muscles, but not too much, as it turns out. However, if you end up adding about 5, maybe 10 pounds of adipose tissue, we call that fat, but I want to call it adipose tissue because I want us all to recognize that adipose tissue, or fat, is a gland. It's a functioning organ system in your body. It's not just some unpleasant thing that bounces up and down when you're running up and down the stairs. I've had that experience before. It kind of freaked me out. So when your body has to produce all these new blood vessels to support all this new tissue, as a gland, as adipose tissue, that signals your body that that's not normal, that that only happens often in seasons of feasting in the sense of human evolution. So that's something that's kind of seasonal, short term. So our body starts to get a little bit confused, a little bit kind of crazy and nervous on a metabolic level when we have this angiogenesis going more than a few months, more than a few years, maybe more than even a decade, constantly having more calories than we need, constantly having to carry around this very large and unhealthy gland that in itself produces a lot of problems. So one of the challenges that we face when we're actually trying to lose adipose tissue or lose fat is the body's ability to reabsorb that vascular tissue, because it's pretty complicated to make new blood vessels. So your body actually gets a little bit stubborn sometimes at losing weight, not because you're not doing enough to manage your calories or exercise or intermittent fasting or whatever you might be trying. It has also to do with your body's enzymatic ability to reabsorb blood vessels. And this is where a lot of people, when they get down to that last 10, 15 pounds, things really seem to slow down. And it's because of that. And the one last thing I'm going to bring up about angiogenesis is it's the thing that your body has to be able to do to grow a cancer cell. And then to grow a cancerous tumor. So when your body is growing a tumor, which we would rather not see, everything that signals angiogenesis is the thing that signals your body, well, tumors must be a thing that we're okay with making because we're okay with angiogenesis. And again, trying to turn that process around to reduce adipose tissue or to reduce an actual tumor. It's the angiogenesis that's the traffic jam, pardon the pun, because reabsorbing that tissue is actually something that's hard to do. So the more we can maintain an anti-angiogenesis lifestyle, in general, seasonally, with respect to what we might be doing, trying to gain muscle tissue and stuff like that, is going to be something else to look into. Because as long as your circulatory system is working as traffic, in the sense of vascular tissue, lymphatic tissue, cerebrospinal tissue, interstitial bound ground substance, as well as microcirculation. That's about traffic. Angiogenesis is about construction and the deconstruction of really hard to build membranes. And that's something you could say in evolution that's not really something we've evolved to or adapted to, because it's been fairly infrequently in our evolutionary past that we've had access to excess calories for several decades in a row while sitting around doing not much exercise. So, this is my first attempt at doing my Substack conversations as a kind of podcast, so that you don't have to sit and read all of this. You can just, follow me along chatting and looking at fun pictures to hide the fact that I'm often looking down at a piece of paper. The next thing I'll be presenting in a few days is going to be 3 different kinds of breath work you can do that will actually help you directly with every aspect of your circulation. So, shameless plug at the end of my video, if you have another minute. I'll be doing the spring cleanse again. I'll be doing it online. I might be doing it live in person in Nelson, BC as well. So if you're local in the Kootenays and you want to come and do a 10-week cleanse course with me, I'll be doing that. It starts March the 17th. It comes with the Returning to an Ancestral Diet cookbook. It's 500 recipes. It comes with the course manual, and it comes with a little self-testing questionnaire that you can take that helps you guide you through the process, because the entire cleanse course, you could say, is kind of like a course that we could have had in high school that would have said, this is your body, this is how it works, this is what goes wrong, and this is what you can do about it. So that's what this course is about. Everyone who takes the course gets a consultation with me, so it's well worth your time and money, because it's like a 20-hour doctor's appointment, I don't know, with a side of stand-up comedy. To help everyone have some fun, some infotainment, again, about how your body works, what goes wrong, and what you can do with it. That'll be starting March the 17th, which is Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if you're interested in doing a 10-week, all-in, take care of everything kind of a cleanse regeneration program, I'll be doing that for the 25th year in a row. So yeah, that course is pretty much bomb-proof. We've done it almost twice a year for 25 years. So if you're interested, let me know. And hopefully I'll see you in the next video on breathwork. And then the third one in this series on circulation will be more on the clinical things like supplements and specific diets and things like that. So thank you for watching. I'm grateful that you got to the end of this. And I'll see you in the next Substack podcast. Take care.